So this is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo editions. This is part A, broadcast at 1100 hours GMT, 1200 hours British Standard Time on Monday the 17th of April 2023. Now today's Times newspaper, London Times newspaper, in its section 2, has got a feature, Your Villa or Mine, and the photograph taken beside what appears to be a helicopter shows two white women and says, the subheading says, what it's like going on holiday with friends, and within brackets, when they are all richer than you. Well, the you could be a taunt to ordinary people and also taunt to somebody who is reading this, who themselves may be quite rich now. So the philosophy, the wisdom that I have gained, in the Greek sense, the wisdom that I have gained based on my reading, non-stop reading and evaluating, investigating, analyzing the mainly Western newspapers, because although I started in Silot, which was in Assam and then in East Pakistan, as in now in Bangladesh, my main contacts with the print so-called journalism began in the 1950s, partly because I was getting access to these Western European languages publications that contained information that I could begin to understand gradually. And also because a member of the family was a subscriber, postal subscriber to the daily newspapers published in Dhaka, in the capital of East Pakistan. So I started the political activities, observations in the mid-1950s when reading the arguments that were advanced by the leader of the democratic movement called Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani. I was more persuaded by his arguments than I was persuaded by the opposition, which was mainly led by the Muslim League. But the Sheikh Mujib was not a factor because he was yet to come into the political scene. The most prominent political democratic campaigner was Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani. And he symbolized what is called the United Front or Jukto Front against the Muslim League, which was in the kind of government that was in existence at that time. So the Muslim League had their electoral symbol. Remember, the country was, and I think still is, significantly populated in the demography by people who cannot read. So it's physical symbols that serve as the kind of mark for electors to choose the party that they support or the candidate or candidates the support that the Muslim League candidates had the lantern as the symbol, presumably because they thought that it was a symbol of enlightenment against the darkness that they were trying to eradicate. But the United Front, the Jukto Front, led by Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani, had the symbol of the boat. Now, the place, the area, East Pakistan, Assam, it's full of waters. And the vehicle that is most essential is, of course, the boat. And so the boat was a more practical, realistic symbol, I think. So I chose to shout in support of the Jukta Front. I wasn't going to vote for either, but I was shouting for the Jukta Front, the United Front, led by and symbolized by Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani. And it is worth pointing out that for the years that followed, up to the end of the year 1970, when the election took place for the National Assembly of Pakistan, which I discussed in the last edition, the part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, dated Sunday, the 16th of April 2023. So up to the election of December 1970, I remained in principle a supporter of the main political movement associated with Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani. I didn't belong to any political party, including the party that Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani was leading or was involved in. My reasons simply was that there didn't exist any political party that could meet the standard of ethics and morality, transparency and honesty that I want to see in a political party or movement that I join, and I found no such party. Although in the United Kingdom, I joined the Labour Party, I didn't join the Labour Party because of any political expectation. I joined the Labour Party because in Tower Hamlets, the political demography was very much represented by the membership of the Labour Party. So communications with the local council, etc., necessitated a proximity with the party that was most frequently in control of the local council, and of course the two parliamentary constituency seats. My democracy, my campaign, all the campaigns remain very much shaped by my high standard, ethics, morality, transparency, objectivity. And in the course of the last, 6 decades, calendar decades, let's say, in the United Kingdom starting, I have found without any doubt, absence of morality and ethics in the political parties and groups, the party members and their programs and their preferences. It may come across as a surprising fact, one of the many surprising facts about the so called British Empire X, that the majority of the people in the political parties and consequently in the elected positions, either locally or centrally in the House of Commons, the majority of the people either seeking the positions or are those who are installed in positions, including as government ministers, incumbents as prime minister, etc. The absolute majority of these people are politically way below the level of competence, knowledge that society and the population, the people deserve in this country or in the kingdom, United Kingdom. Well, after 70 years or so, it has become kind of aligned with the name, the United Kingdom. When Brenda was there, it was United Kingdom, but it was actually Queendom. The King Brian now completely and demographic. Now, this is United Kingdom represented by the King Brian. Now, remember I started with this newspaper, Times newspaper, section 2, to holiday with them. Now, clearly, that is typical representation of the actual people that the Times cares about. It doesn't care about the overwhelming, more than overwhelming majority of the people, even those who could be treated as readers of the type like the newspaper, the Times newspaper. And this is the period, this is the day when the Times has got on the front page two main items. One is the reference to Rishi Sunak saying that adults should all be able to do maths. We should come to that shortly. But in terms of the crisis in health, the NHS, the Times item, the heading is NHS nurses threaten to strike until Christmas. And there is a picture, of course, from the conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. And the caption to the picture says Orthodox icons rescued from a church destroyed yesterday, that is on Sunday, the 16th of April, by a Russian missile. Now, near the sound, the pronunciation is completely imperfect because I don't know the language. So the pronunciation of the spelling is Zaporizhia. So there are two ZHZH. Zaporizhia, as the faithful prepared to mark Easter. The attack came amid fears that Ukraine could lose control of its skies next month, based on an assessment in leaked Pentagon files that it is low on air defense missiles. The details of this particular item are printed on page 24. So the picture is as war ravaged sites look like. War ravaged sites cannot be artificially created in the authentic way that this kind of picture represent the reality. So the movement that I represent and I have been representing has been caused destruction of the archives, the newspapers, the files that have been housed, if you like, or stored in about 20 different locations across the borough of Tower Hamlets and parts of the borough of Newark over the last 50 plus years. And the destruction caused to those included the destruction carried out by a criminal called Paul Varma. Criminal Paul Varma, I gave him the name Varmeen, was given control of the home in New Road as a result of the decision by the Royal London Hospital, which owned the freehold in the property, to put the property at auction in 1987. The property was put on auction in 1987 not because the Royal London Hospital needed to get rid of the property, but because for the previous relevant period that the Royal London Hospital owned the freehold to properties along New Road and nearby streets. The management of the properties by and on behalf of the Royal London Hospital was, to put it in one word, negligent, and to put it in two words, criminally negligent, and in three words, racistly criminally negligent. Because the majority of the people who occupied the properties, mainly New Road, London E1, just happened to be people from the same background coming from Bangladesh or other parts of the subcontinent. So, what happened when a ceiling fell? The ceiling in the basement where I was working with a portable typewriter, 1987, September, the laptop was yet to evolve. I had my kitten on my shoulder while I was doing the typing. And it was just a miracle that I and the kitten were spared because the debris fell inches from where I was sitting. Now, this could have finished us both, the kitten and me. So it wasn't something that was hypothetical, it was actually happening. And this was the kind of destruction, the dysfunction, the kind of unsafe state of the building that we had been warning the London hospital about. So when he made the demand after this, instead of accepting the responsibility, the Royal London Hospital decided to put the whole property, the entire street, at auction. Now, the details of the auction and all the other things will be updated on in due course. But that's what was the link, because at auction, this Indian criminal, crook, whose full name is Mahendra Paul Varmin, this criminal confected a series of lies in order to get me out of the property because he bought the property at auction. I didn't have the £100,000 cash to pay, so he made the bid and he got the property. And he was aided and abetted by a criminal sitting as a district judge called Manners. So, racist woman called Manners. I think Manners was the evilness personifying the racism. Evil Manners. She ignored all my representations, and the representation all concerned about the unique character and the importance of the work that I was doing and the contents of the documents and documentary items, both in print and also in audio and video formats that dated back decades, and including one collection that the late Fatima Hiren, a German woman who became Muslim, who sadly passed away now, she sent me from Germany the original copies of the weekly publication in East Pakistan in the 1960s that she and I contributed to. Now, all of these, of course, will be duly updated on. Fatima Hiran and the American woman who also has passed away now, Mariam Jamila, Those two women, both Western persons who became Muslims, I didn't have any contact with Maryam Jamila. And Fatima Hirian, I did communicate with, but not personally. And I met her in the 1970s in a central London kind of meeting where she attended the meeting. That's the only time that I was able to spend about an hour with her, and I recorded an audio interview with her, which is priceless. She was an absolutely, spiritually, ethically, and morally of the highest possible standard that a person could be. And so she went back to Germany and sent me the copies of the publication that she and I, and of course Mariam Jamila, contributed to. And that publication, as I said, is priceless. It cannot be replaced. It cannot be found again, because I have tried in the years that have passed to find copies of these publications. That is a typical publication, and most of the libraries, well, the British Library, I don't think has got that, because the British Library, despite the huge propaganda about its collection, is at the center, the core of it, a very sophisticated warrior for the Crusades and the cause of Crusaders. So therefore there is a suppression of wisdom and sources of knowledge that would represent anything remotely identifiable as Muslim. Neither Fatima Hiran nor myself subscribe to anything that could remotely be called, in today's language, extremist or whatever. As I said, Fatima Hiran was a highly knowledgeable, spiritual individual, dedicated to knowledge and search. And during our meeting at that event in central London, she was trying to help, and she was saying that Britain was not really conducive to the pursuit of knowledge that she and I would be interested in continuing. So she suggested, as a mere suggestion, because she said that Aisha Ramu, the African sister that she was active in co-writing books and stuff, that she and Aisha Ramu could arrange for me to go to an African country and do the work. Well, I had just begun to settle in the United Kingdom, and it was the consideration of relocating with all the losses of the archives and the work that I have been doing that prompted me to review the suggestion, and I didn't carry out the suggestion. But Aisha Ramu, well, Aisha wasn't present in our conversation, but Fatima Irian was good friends with Aisha, and she said they could help me relocate to a country in Africa, probably Nigeria. My task was not the country. My task was to continue the work that I had been doing in the 1950s and 60s. Remember what this started. started newspapers. And as I have said many times before, this is now, I started in the 1950s. So you've got 5 decades there, and this is the third decade this century. So it's a lot of decades that I have been spending consistently reading, studying, analyzing newspapers. And when I see this kind of completely selfish, anti social in the big way evidence of the corrupt practice of so called journalism in the Times, because they're taunting people who are in crisis in terms of living, cost of living crisis. Your bill or mine, what it's like going on holiday with friends when they are all richer than you. Now, there is no sign there that the Times newspaper recognizes the majority of the people in the UK, let alone in the rest of the world. And there is, of course, no clue as to any interest the Times newspaper, its editors, or writers and the contractors, freelance, whatever, would want to know how the inequalities of income are perpetrated and perpetuated, and how the basic daily rights and needs of the people who are, of course, nowhere to be seen in the richness surrounding these people that the Times caters for. So I would say that criminality, the criminality of a country such as the United Kingdom and its parts, the criminality is not produced by people who are in poverty and low income. The criminality is created and perpetrated and perpetuated by the ones that own the propaganda and the ones that they do the propaganda for. Ones in government and the real sources and forces behind the agenda of the government. Now, there is a kind of rising criticism against the Labour Party focusing on Rishi Sunak's personal opinions, preferences, etc., etc. And of course, the newspapers, Fleet Street mainly, is a pro conservative collection of propaganda outlets that keep the majority of the electors in what they would like them to be, in a state of zombiness, ignorance of the facts and ignorance of the options. So he says, Rishi Sunak, that the economy, the British economy, is suffering from failure of numeracy. And it is hinted that the standing of Britain in terms of numeracy by the adults will be improved by all kinds of measures that he is obviously going to take. Clearly, the Times and Sunak are in denial of Sunak's own corruption, selfishness. But Sunak is married to this daughter of an Indian rich person who doesn't have any morality that is consistent with the wanted line followed by the UK government increasingly against China, and of course, the hostility that successive regimes in India have displayed towards China or against China. I'm only citing the evidence that is objectively available. Because Infosys, which is the main vehicle for Akhatamurthy's father, that is Rishi Sunak's father-in-law, has been doing brisk business with China. So when Sunak is reportedly saying that the UK economy is suffering from failure of numeracy, this is a brazen lie. Absolutely brazen lie. And that shows that Rishi Sunak is himself ignorant and an idiotic expert on the economy. There are all kinds of factors that keep society unequal, and in the grips of poverty, as experienced by millions and millions and millions of people. Take, for example, the behavior of the Sainsbury's, one of the biggest and the oldest supermarkets in the UK. I mean, the price of daily goods in the Sainsbury's stores is changed almost without any notice, every other day almost. There is no way that this has anything to do with the failure of the numeracy of the ordinary people who have to put up with this kind of price fluctuations intentionally created by the Sainsbury's, the big company. If the money is limited, if the money received by the workers or the employees is limited, then it is that limitation that restricts their options. It's not their knowledge of numeracy. In the not knowledge of their not their knowledge to count the money. They know how much they receive and they know how much they have to pay. And the audacity on the part of this idiot, Rishi Sunak, to even say there is the numeracy that is holding the economy back, not the discrimination in the policies pursued by him and his co-conservatives, or the corruption-ridden, sexually abused Confederation of British Industries, CBI. The fact that I'm talking about all of these, and this is not reflected in the vocabulary of the so-called opposition, allegedly fronted by the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, makes the point, which takes me back to the 1950s when I supported the ideology and the movement fronted by Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani, and why I didn't join any of the political parties that came into surface during the decade and a half since the mid 1950s that followed. One of the politicos that was opposed to the Awami League in the 1960s, when the Awami League was being fronted by Sheikh Mujib, was a man called AQM. AQM. Was it Shafiqul Islam, or I'll check the name of last name and update my commentary accordingly. But he was a close family member of the Jamaat-e-Islami East Pakistan leader called Ghulam Azam. This was Shafiqul Islam, I think. AQM Shafiqul Islam. And in my covering a day-long conference or rally that took place in the race course in Dhaka, which is situated right in front of the University of Dhaka Arts faculty, a day-long rally that took place in 1970. And remember, I'm the only one who did my journalism without getting any money or asking for any money from anyone that owned the outlet that I wrote in. And the reason, just to reiterate for anyone who is seeing this or hearing this for the first time, the reason I chose not to work for any of the publication owners or editors was and remains simple. I would not be able to write the truth. I would have to write according to the agenda that they set. There is a world of difference. So I didn't write the reports because I wrote about 4 different reports, all of which were published in the original in the newspaper the following day, of what I had seen at the rally. And I reported as objectively as objectivity meant then and means now for me, and has always meant. Really truthful practitioner of journalism reporting without fear or favor. I am the one who does that, not the Financial Times, which I call the financial crimes, and most certainly not the Times, nor any of the other outlets. And I shall talk about the I newspaper shortly, especially to see their version of the piece in the Sunday Times yesterday, Sunday Times Color magazine, attributing 2 comments to the African origin American actor Freeman, Where is Freeman? I'll come to that. This Morgan Freeman has been promoted in the Sunday Times culture supplement as saying that he thinks that the Black History Month is an insult, and also that he objects to being called African American. On the ground, he says that European people in Africa or other countries are not referred to as European Americans. They're referred to by the country in Europe and America. Now, Morgan Freeman is, of course, I condemn the Sunday Times color supplement yesterday for describing it as a Hollywood god. Of course, Freeman is not only not a god, but he's not really a very good actor either. What Morgan Freeman has been doing is over capitalizing on the fact that he is black, African origin. And there is a lot of racist manipulation going on, has been going on for 100 years in Hollywood, so called, where the Hollywood film industry has kind of given priority to those black skinned African ones that the Hollywood industry, the racists, could manipulate and use as part of their propaganda. And Morgan Freeman is one of those mental slaves. African American, he may think African American is an insult, but essentially, most of the people of that part of the demography are okay with the descriptive terminology African American. It doesn't deny the African origin, that is important, and it asserts the American presence. So we'll come back to Morgan Freeman again, going back to the question of the standard of living, cost of living, and the status of journalism. When the Guardian London recently launched its kind of completely typically Guardian type dishonest self publication, saying that they're now owning up to the profits that the Guardian's founders made from slavery, etc., etc. Now, it's not just slavery. I have been looking at the Guardian's archives and checking on the archives of the period that the Guardian has been in existence during the East India Company and the British so-called Empire. And I've checked on the lives of people in Assam, in Sylhet, where I come from. The Guardian, in its coverage of those places, doesn't come across as being remotely different from the rivals, the Times, the Telegraph, etc. So it's not factually sustainable for the Guardian to expect that it is kind of less racist, less corrupt, less imperialist, and less hostile to the Muslims on the ground of the crusade? The Guardian has betrayed people in the United Kingdom, white people who have actually challenged the corruption, the racism, capitalism, etc., etc. I mean, the treatment by Peter Preston of the anti-nuclear war protester Sarah Tisdale is one example. The Guardian's reporter who was called by private eye Martin Sweetie Walker. Sweetie was the nickname given by private eye, I think mischievously by a collection of Richard Ingrams and Willie Rushton, etc., or Paul Foot included. Now, I had an encounter with Sweetie Walker at the Institute of Contemporary Arts. Well, I had encounters with the other racist criminal, William Shawcross. But the encounter with Sweetie Walker was also about the same topic. The Western propaganda machine, in the form of the Western media, doing propaganda for empire. And both the criminal racist William Shawcross and Martin, the Guardian Sweetie Walker, reacted in an identical way, as if both of them had been mechanically trained, programmed. Remember, this was the 1980s. By some kind of secret operation. Remember, these are two. Well, I mean, Sweetie Walker is less kind of ubiquitous than Shawcross had been, because Shawcross claimed that he wrote the authoritative account of the Pol Pot genocide and massacres in Cambodia. Now, based on that so-called claim, Shawcross profited in enhancing his image to the point that even now he is being appointed by the conservatives as a wise person to look at institutions and so on. I mean, a kind of Louise Casey, who has been in the headlines recently with her so-called review of the Metropolitan Police. Well, Casey, what shall I call her? Louise Casey is the harvester. She harvests other people's work. And what she has done with the review, so-called, of the Metropolitan Police, is in effect gather together the telling findings over decades by other people investigating various aspects of the racism, sexism, and criminal behavior by literally thousands of employed policemen and women in the name of the London Metropolitan Police. And she has done a synthesis in a crafty way, intending to make the synthesis look across to the people and come across as if it was her, Louis Casey's original work. It is not. Of course, she has done the original work to the extent of harvesting, looking for, and collecting together the findings of other people by other people. As I said before, not in this edition, but I've said many times that the Times newspaper, which is owned differently in the 1960s, remember how long it was? In the 1960s, the Times newspaper, whoever owned it at the time, did an investigation into the corruption up to that time, up to the 1960s, the corruption that had dominated the London Metropolitan Police. And the fall of Scotland Yard is the heading that I remember after coming across the piece, because I wasn't in London in the 1960s. So I had to look at the actual archives of the Times. And it was the fall of Scotland Yard. Now that was mainly done in the 1960s, and the work, whenever it was published and it continued to be referred to for many years after that. Essential kind of basic fact work was done in the 1960s, at about the 1960s. So if you look at the 1960s to the publication in February by Louise Casey of her so-called review, you see how many decades? More than 60 years. More than 60 years passed since the fall of Scotland Yard. Published, let's say, mainly in association with the Times newspaper as it then was. I mean, you cannot, in a model that I have created of contemporary ethical moral audit, based on the framework originally created by the Greek philosophers, you cannot take a kind of, you cannot just relax about life as it depends on those who hold and exercise power. No room. You have to do it ceaselessly. And when it comes to the behavior of the biggest crime-related organization anywhere in post-1940s Western Europe, it is the London Metropolitan Police, which has got the largest number of people. How could they leave it alone for 60 years? And all the confessions that have been extracted from Mark Rowley, who is the current incumbent in the post of the so-called commissioner in the name of the London Metropolitan Police. All the confessions that Rowley has been forced to make about criminals operating as policemen and women. These are extracted, not volunteered. Note that difference. Rowley is not a stranger, he's not a newcomer to the London Metropolitan Police. How come that Rowley is only registering as a name, spewing in the name of the London Metropolitan Police bureaucracy? Now, what had he been up to when the proven liar Ian Blair openly conspired to hide the truth about Cressida Dick and other commanders who knew that an innocent man, the Brazilian, had been murdered by the police. So where was Mark Rowley then? And then when the murder took place, Sarah Everard was murdered. She was kidnapped. She was raped. She was murdered. And her murdered body was burned by Wayne Couzens. And Cressida Dick, even after all this, Cressida Dick defiantly aggravated the criminal enterprise by attacking people who were rationally, ethically, reasonably trying to draw attention to this most unacceptable, despicable outrage by the police force. And of course, Patsy Stevenson, one of the protesters at the peaceful vigil in honor of Sarah Everard, was pinned to the ground and assaulted by police for daring to show solidarity both with Sarah Everard and also with all the other women that had been attacked and violated by the police criminals. Where was Mark Rowley? In any case, when the review came, or the decision to stage this review involving Louis Casey, this was very much absolutely predictable timing. I mean, Louis Casey was appointed in order to do a series of washing. Not whitewash, it should be called crime wash. The criminal orientation that dominated and dominates the behavior of the Metropolitan Police in London needed something like a drastic kind of commentary, not from a black person, black including African, Asian, whatever, most certainly not from a Muslim, but from a white individual who has been almost not quite there yet, but almost canonized and made into a kind of saint in the propaganda business. Since the liar war criminal Tony Blair invented Louis Casey. And Louis Casey's career has skyrocketed. So they couldn't find anybody that could remotely resemble, compare with her. And it was perfect, the perfect weapon the Metropolitan Police establishment thought they could use to silence society, which is what they're hoping now since February has been going on. As I said before, a review is a different word from inquiry. But let's say, in effect, it is an inquiry in the sense that she has collected data and evidence and whatever, and published some kind of finding and given a series of recommendations, etc. In the case of the United Kingdom, which is mainly England centric, public inquiries are a weapon. Public inquiries are not ever confessions of lies by the authorities, by the state, by the agencies. Public inquiries are and have been intentionally devised as weapons to carry on the criminality on the part of the state and to support fascistic encroachments of civil liberties, etc., which is part of the current program that is underway and fronted by Rishi Sunak and Cruella, Ivila Fernandez, who has adopted a Jewish name, she says, out of love. Now, Suella, Ivila, Cruella Fernandez, and Rishi Sunak, I mean, they are not, by any stretch of the imagination, they are not white skinned. Both of them have got noticeable skin color pigmentation that can be distinguished from the white European pigmentation. But these two are being used as tools for the fascistic propaganda agenda and narrative. Many civil liberties are under attack from the legislation that they're pushing. And there is no sign anywhere in the proposed pieces of new legislation that holds the likes of the Metropolitan Police to account whatsoever, or holds the likes of the criminal cabal that dished out anything between 10 to 20 billion pounds from the public, if you like, resource under the cover of doing various things for the peoples, preventing the spread of COVID 19, as it is clear from the report online of the independent newspaper today, that COVID 19 will return and the United Kingdom remains unprepared. So they plundered and robbed and looted the public and exposed the country to poverty being experienced by the majority. Poverty in the economic sense as well as poverty in terms of the state of health and care. Rishi Sunak's mathematical calculations are, of course, seriously dishonest based on his own behavior about taxes, about disclosures, etc., and all the other things about his wife, non-dom status, and all the rest of it. But the other thing that Rishi Sunak's over promoted kind of sanctimonious opinion about mathematics and numeracy is that he doesn't recognize the policies that he has adopted that actually mathematically calculated to make people poorer. And there is no answer to that. And he will, of course, reject any findings based on mathematics, mathematical calculation of the corrupt policies that he has been fronting and supporting and backing. And the mathematics doesn't help. The victims of Suella Ibila Cruella illegality against the perfectly legally constitutionally entitled seekers of refuge in the United Kingdom, which is a signatory to the international declarations and agreements about refugees and refuge status. And the newspapers, like the Times today, are absolutely criminally negligent and ignorant to allow this kind of propaganda by the likes of Rishi Sunak instead of checking the numbers of lies that he has already perpetrated and the numbers of people that are going to be left to suffer inequalities, denials, deprivations beyond any mathematical calculations. How is it possible to leave groups of people in society exposed to robbery by the banking crooks, by the big business donors, and the contractors of the likes of HS2? How can the people who are reduced to starvation level, how can that be changed by the victims being able to count the blows that they are being inflicted? We shall be continuing on all of those in the next editions. This is 1 hour and a quarter hour, the 1 hour and 15 minutes. And we are ending this particular edition at 12:15 GMT on Monday, the 17th of April 2023.